Hey there, welcome to today's project. Today we're going to be building a movie box application that is complete with a lot of features like pagination and the ability to search for specific images or series. Now, this project is built with Svelte 4 and Shadcn-svelte and Svelte-kit. So if you're interested in those topics, I think this is for you. And with the more and the concepts that you're going to be learning in this tutorial are data fetching with server files, API routes, routing, routing and navigation, and how to use a very brief delve into how to use the hooks.servers.ts file. And so if you like that, just you can go ahead and stay and watch this. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Now let me just show you some of the features that I talked about. Now I could come over here and search for a movie. Let's say Mad Max. Because I actually really like the Mad Max movies. Search for that, and I can go into a specific page that shows me a lot of information about Mad Max and recommends videos for me that are relate recommends movies for me that are related to the Mad Max movie. And I get some YouTube trailers for the Mad Max movie. And by the way, this uses an iframe. We're not going to be watching that, of course. And to show you pagination, I can just come over here to the bottom of the screen and I can paginate, and the movies that get mapped are going to change. I can also change the series. I can see a whole lot of series, and the trending movies over here, the trending series rather, also changes, reacts to that state change. Now, if this looks interesting to you, you should watch this. And I think that there's some precursors for you before actually taking this. There's some things you should know before you take this tutorial. You should be familiar with JavaScript, CSS, Tailwind, because I don't actually go over the markup and the CSS. I actually encourage you to just go into my GitHub repository and copy a lot of the markup and paste it while I explain the JavaScript and the Svelte-kit functionality. I don't actually go ahead and write all the markup. So you should be comfortable with those mentioned technologies. Now, this project will definitely look good for your portfolio because it's visually stunning. So let's get right into it. We're going to try to set up our application now by following the directives given in the Shadcn spelled library for setting up a spelled kit application that actually does use Shadcn spelled. Now this is the first command that we're given. So I'm going to copy this, and I use pnpm because it's super fast and you should too. And we're going to change the name of this to moviebox. I'm going to click and enter. Oops, my bad. I some of the command away. Moviebox. And then a prompt's going to come out which is going to ask you if you want a demo application, a skeleton project, or a library project. I'm going to go with skeleton project because we need bare bones scaffolding. We're going to build everything up from scratch. And yes, we'll be using TypeScript syntax. So yes, and you can just add prettier for code formatting. Next, we're gonna do this, which is npx spelled add tailwind css at latest, and click enter again. So we're gonna go ahead and change directory and change to moviebox, and then run the second command. No, I do not want to use the typography plugin, and I will be using PMPM with this, not npm, but PMPM. And then an installation will begin. Finally, we are gonna install. And change directory to moviebox. Oh, we're already there, so we can just open up VS Code in that directory instead. And we have our app scaffolded already, which is this. So come over here, open up a new terminal, and copy this, PNPM, come over here and paste it in. They're gonna ask us a few questions with these prompts. And would you like to use TypeScript? Yes, we are using TypeScript. Would you like to? We're gonna use the default styles. Our base color is going to be slate, and yes, we're in an app for the global CSS file. We're in app.css. Tailwind config is located. Yeah, that's the name of the file. We're gonna be using the lib alias for our components, our utils, and that should be it. You can just tap enter for every single one, and our project is gonna get initialized. Shadcn has already added all these default styles that we're going to be using when we install Shadcn components, which we will later on in this video. The first step I'm going to actually take in now, this is our project setup, and the first step I'm actually going to take is one that I'm sure you've never seen anybody do before. But the first thing that I'm going to do is actually delete my plus page.svelte file. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And next, I'm going to create a dynamic route. If you don't understand what that is, no problem. I'm going to create a new folder, and it will have angle brackets, and it will be called page number. Within that file, that folder rather, I want to have a plus page.felt file and page.server.cs file for fetching data. Next, I'm going to create a group route. And if you don't know what all these things are, don't worry about it. I will explain down the line. And that has round brackets. I'm just gonna call this content. No, I did not type that correctly, so I have to rename it. I'm going to call this content. And within content, I'm going to add two folders, one series and the other movie. And within my routes, I'm going to add a hooks.server.ts file. And finally, I'm going to create a hook.server.ts file in my root src folder. Hooks. The next thing I'm going to do in my hooks.server.ts file, actually, why I've arranged this the way that I have is because our app is going to be paginated, and we do not presently have a homepage. We don't have a homepage. So what I want to do is whenever anybody routes or goes into a homepage, I want them to get redirected into the dynamic route, which is page number. And if you don't understand how hooks.server.cs files work, they're essentially middleware in case you're coming from backend and a backend backend in case you have backend experience. Hooks.server.ts is middleware. It intercepts every single request that our app gets, and we can modify that and do whatever we want with that, including redirect to other routes. In case, let's say, we've deleted a route and we don't want anybody to access it for the meantime, so we can send them to another route. And I'm going to start by importing redirect from the .js function kit, and then I've written this synchronous function, synchronous handle function. Essentially, hooks.server.cs files export handle functions, and these handle functions run whenever whenever we get a request. Now, what I'm doing here is handle, event, and resolve. These are two objects that we get in each request. On a normal note, if we don't, the default behavior is this: we just return a response after our wait after resolving and the event. I'm just gonna go ahead and remove this. We do not need it for now. And we resolve the event and the response gets returned. However, in my case, I want to, if my event.url.pathname, which is what's being requested in the browser, if it's equal to home, I want to console.log redirected, and I want to redirect the user to the page called one. And within our app, this is going to actually map to the plus page.svelte file that is inside this dynamic route called page number, because this is home and then page number, which in this case is one. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually create some markup within the plus page.svelte on the page number route. I'm going to write a script tag and import the page store from Svelte. And essentially what I'm doing here is, after importing the page store from Svelte, in case you do not know what the page store is, the page store is a global store that is provided by Svelte that we could use to access different things in our application, like the parameters, in this case the page number, which is a string, and there are other things we could as well access. Let's say a URL, page.params. We can access the data for this specific page, an error, the form, the parameters as we have accessed before, the route, state, status, and a lot of stuff. This comes directly from Svelte-kit. I did not create this store. It's a global store. And then, but we want our parameters, and we want the page number. I'm just trying to demonstrate to you that this works. And then we're gonna go ahead and run our application. And we're actually requesting in the browser. I'm requesting for the home page, and I'm just gonna go ahead and refresh this. You can see a console log redirected, and we actually do get the page number over here, which is one, and it shows one in this p tag. And in our server.ts file, that's exactly that's exactly what we asked for. That's, and we got our console log. We got redirected, and that's what shows up here. Now, if we check out our website that we're trying to build, we're gonna notice that there are applications, sorry, movies that get outputted to the screen, and there are lots of them. Now, if you've had any experience with programming before, you probably know that this is coming from some API, which stands for Application Programming Interface. Now, there's a public API that I actually use for this. I did not create the API myself, and it's called the moviedb.org. And you're gonna need an API key. I already have mine, so you can head over to their website if you don't have one, and you come to this developer reference page and you get an API key. And they'll ask you to sign in, you give them a username and a password, and you can actually get your API key. Now, Svelte-kit provides us with a way of specifying environment variables, and we can do that in a .env file. So I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna say .env, create a new .env file. Now that's not supposed to be in the root folder, so I'm gonna take it into the project folder, the overarching project folder, not in. It's not supposed to be in the src folder, the source folder. Now there are two types of environment variables in Svelte-kit. There are private variables and there are public variables, and private variables can only be called from servers. That is pages files like page.server.ts files or server.ts files or layout.server.ts files. Those files are essentially servers, and private environment variables can only be called from files like that because ideally they're secrets and we want to protect them. And the API key in this case is also a secret because the API is actually has parameters that if we exceed will get shut down. So we're gonna have to keep this secret. You shouldn't share it with anyone because then they could just take your API and then use it to create some other app, and that gets a lot of requests, and then your API gets shut down. Your API key rather gets shut down. So I'm gonna say secret, all in caps. Whenever you preface an environment variable in SpellKit with secret, that means you're telling the SpellKit application that this particular environment variable is to be used only on the servers and it's a private environment variable. I'm gonna say secret tmdb API key. I'm gonna make this equals to my API key. Of course, I'm not gonna show you guys, but yeah, this is where your own API key should go. Now you might be wondering why I've chosen to use this particular type of code in our hooks.server.ts file, where we essentially don't have a home page, but we get immediately redirected into a dynamic route whenever we navigate to the home page. Now, I just want to show you a quick view of the demo. If we scroll down all the way to our pagination bar, right now we're on page 1. If we were to go to page 2 and we have this set of data that's on page 1, different movies that are on page 1, and then if we were to click on page 2, we get a new set of movies. So basically, the movies that we get are dependent on the URL on the parameter here, and that's why I've actually chosen that design feature of not having a homepage and being able to redirect immediately the to the to the dynamic route. Now, I'm just going to show you a quick demo of how loading data based on a route parameter looks like in a page.server.ts file. Now, I'm just going to show you a quick demo of exactly what I mean and how exactly we can access the current parameter that we have set on our URL. So, I've created this function in our page.server.ts file in our dynamic route, and do not mind these red squiggly lines. It's because Svelte-kit has not run and it does not know the types that we are talking about yet. But however, if I do run this application, I'm going to go ahead and access this uh, this data that's being returned here. So let me just go through this function real quick. It's a load function in the page.server.ts file in the dynamic route page number, and it returns as data the number that is in our dynamic route. And I've done this because params.page number actually returns a string. So, oh my bad. Here's what we're gonna do instead: number times two. That should work. The params.page number actually returns a string, and we'd like to turn that into a number first, and then multiply it by two, and access that data in our page.float file. And how we could do that is by saying export let data. And I'm going to make an H1 and say data dot data. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and run this application, pm run dev, come over here and try to open this up in my browser. We get undefined. Why? So, after running the application and accessing our load, the value of the data that we loaded from the page.server.ts file, we can display it to the page. And what we're returning from the page.server.ts file is we want to get the parameters on our present URL, which in this case we put as page number, as you can see with this dynamic route that we set up here, and it is 2 right now in in our URL. And after accessing that, we want to turn this into a number because params.page number actually returns a string. Anything on the params object actually returns a string. And when we turn that into a number, we like to multiply it by 2. And with TypeScript, I'm saying that I just want to return this number in an object as a number, so that when we access this in our plus page.spell file, we do not get a type error. And as you can see, we get 4 here. I can go ahead and delete this just in case you're getting confused. We go ahead and we get 4. Now, if I were to change this and say 3 and reload this page, actually, we get 6. If I change that to 4, we get 8, and so on and so forth. And that's just to show you how we can fetch data dependent on our present URL parameter, which is basically what we do here in our demo, which we can paginate and change what page it is that we're getting data from. I can go ahead and change this to 1. All of a sudden, I'm going to have my data changed, and I could go ahead and change this to 3, and the movies that get mapped will automatically change. And that's the same thing that we're actually trying to go for over here. Now, in the next section, we're obviously going to get our hands dirty and actually start fetching actual data from the API that I told you to get your API key from. If you haven't done that, please go to themoviedb.org and the developer reference, sign in and get yourself an API key. It is absolutely free. Now, I've gone ahead and created some types for us, and I wouldn't recommend that you actually type all of this out. You can just go to my GitHub repository, which will be in the description of the video below, and you can go ahead and copy these types, and within your library file you can create a types.ts file, and you can export all these types from there. Now we're going to go into our page.server.ts file for our dynamic route and create a an update our load function that actually fetches data. Right now, all that our load function does is return our present parameter times 2. That's not what we want. We actually want data from our our API. I hope by now you've actually gotten your API key. And you have in your .env file, I hope that in your .env file you actually have a secret CMDB API key. You've actually set that there, and then we're gonna just go into page.server.ts and start making some magic happen. All right. So first things first is we are going to import our API key from env static private. I told you if you prefixed it as secret, it's going to be a private environment variable in Svelte-kit, and that means that we can only access it in server context. We are in a page.server.cs file, so we can access it. So we can definitely access it from here. Next things next is we're gonna create import one of the types from types.ts, which is movie result, this large object, which is essentially how the API returns most queries for movies. And this large object with properties on it, variance ID, yeah, you get the whole picture. It returns a lot of things, and then we can come back here and create a header. And next, we want to create a header that we will use for our authentication in our fetch function. I've already created that. And the actual body of our function. Now, don't let this scare you. I'm just going to go over this in a bit and remove the previous return because that's no longer accessible code. And I'm just going to explain this to you in a jiffy. Now, we have created a header that says that we basically want JSON, and for our authorization, our bearer is our API key, which we have imported over here from envstatic.private, and the API is basically using this as authorization to say, oh, is this individual that is trying to make this request to our API, is this individual actually authorized to do so? And over here, we specify two variables, movies and series, that we eventually populate later. And here we are fetching data from the API. And this is it, api.themovie.org /3 discover movie da 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 da. Now this is what I really want to point out. The params that we have access to, the parameters that we have access to within this plus page.server. Jesus. Don't do me like that. Don't fucking do me like that. Oh my god. Ah, fuck. Oh. And so the params that we have access to in this file, we are basically saying on this page, what am I gonna call this? It's actually also a parameter on the API, but it's called page, and it basically sections its return, or the data that it returns in pages. There's data for page one, two, so as many as the API chooses to provide on a certain day. And if we're paginating our data, we wanna make this request dependent on this. So this is in backticks, and so we can specify this params or page number, which also luckily happens to be string, and we're gonna fetch the data that correlates to our present URL parameter on that. So this is the fetch for the movies, and this is the fetch for the series. We do quite the same thing, but the API URL is a bit different for the series, but it still has the same page query, and which we pass in our params or page number to fetch that data for us for that specific URL parameter in our application. Then we have a try catch block that says, we're gonna await both promises because we do not want race conditions. We want both promises to go simultaneously and come back. We also do that with the JSON, the JSON function over here after we have accessed our our data from requests. And if you didn't know, promise.all actually returns an array, and that's why we said request 0.json, request 1.json, which is pointing to the indexes. So request 0 points to the movies request, meaning our movie data, and request 1 points to the series request, meaning our series data, and then we're gonna turn that from JSON into JavaScript objects. And that's what this JSON function is for. But it's an asynchronous function, and that's why we put in an await and a promise.all, because they're two, and we do not want them. We want them to arrive simultaneously. After we do receive our values, we then populate these two variables over here. We say movies is equals to, now these are properties on the object that gets returned from the fetch request that we just made. And we say, okay, we want the total amount of pages that the API has provided for us for our movie request, and the actual movies for the present page that we're on, which is in our case presently page 1, and the same thing for total pages for series. Now why we do this later, why we request total pages, I will show you later, but for now just know that we want to return total pages to our plus page.svelte file, so that we know how many pages of either sort of data that the API has. And then we have a catch block that basically doesn't do anything, just says console.log error, and we we actually take in our variables, and we return an object that has movies, series, and total pages. And for total pages, we're doing something interesting. We say math.minimum, which is the smallest value between the total pages on the movie object and the total pages on the series object, and return the smallest one to us. As again, I've said, I will eventually show you the reason why I'm doing this, but for now, just know that I'm doing that. And movies, just the actual movies on this movie object, as we populate this movie and series variables. And we're using TypeScript to say, okay, basically, this is type coercion. I'm saying I want my movies to be returned as an array of movie result objects. If you remember, movie result was a type that we specified in types.ts, and we imported into this file for fetching data. And series is also the same thing, an array of movie results, and the params that we have access to in this file, we are basically saying on this page what am I gonna call this? It's actually also a parameter on the API, but it's called page, and it basically sections its return, or the data that it returns in pages. There's data for page one, two, so as many as the API chooses to provide on a certain day. And if we're paginating our data, we wanna make this request dependent on this. So this is in backticks, and so we can specify this params the page number, which also luckily happens to be string, and we're gonna fetch the data that correlates to our present URL parameter on that. So this is the fetch for the movies, and this is the fetch for the series. We do quite the same thing, but the API URL is a bit different for the series, but it still has the same page query, and which we pass in our params the page number to fetch that data for us for that specific URL parameter in our application. Then we have a try catch block that says, we're gonna await both promises because we do not want race conditions. We want both promises to go simultaneously and come back. We also do that with the JSON, the JSON function over here after we have accessed our our data from requests. And if you didn't know, promise.all actually returns an array, and that's why we said request 0.json, request 1.json, which is pointing to the indexes. So request 0 points to the movies request, meaning our movie data, and request 1 points to the series request, meaning our series data, and then we're gonna turn that from JSON into JavaScript objects. And that's what this JSON function is for. But it's an asynchronous function, and that's why we put in an await and a promise.all, because they're two, and we do not want them. We want them to arrive simultaneously. After we do receive our values, we then populate these two variables over here. We say movies is equals to, now these are properties on the object that gets returned from the fetch request that we just made. And we say, okay, we want the total amount of pages that the API has provided for us for our movie request, and the actual movies for the present page that we're on, which is in our case presently page 1, and the same thing for total pages for series. Now why we do this later, why we request total pages, I will show you later, but for now just know that we want to return total pages to our plus page.svelte file, so that we know how many pages of either sort of data that the API has. And then we have a catch block that basically doesn't do anything, just says console.log error, and we we actually take in our variables, and we return an object that has movies, series, and total pages. And for total pages, we're doing something interesting. We say math.minimum, which is the smallest value between the total pages on the movie object and the total pages on the series object, and return the smallest one to us. As again, I've said, I will eventually show you the reason why I'm doing this, but for now, just know that I'm doing that. And movies, just the actual movies on this movie object, as we populate this movie and series variables. And we're using TypeScript to say, okay, basically, this is type coercion. I'm saying I want my movies to be returned as an array of movie result objects. If you remember, movie result was a type that we specified in types.ts, and we imported into this file for fetching data. And series is also the same thing, an array of movie results, and of course total pages, we want that returned as a number. I'm going to go ahead and delete this previous return because it's no longer reachable code. And immediately you see that there's a problem in our plus page.spelt file, because data no longer has this number property on it, no longer have that. Now basically what I'm going to do is, if we're returning if we're going to be returning an array of movies, I want to be able to access that, and I want to map it out for you to see. And I'm gonna do that in an each block. So basically, now that we actually have our data returned, I'd like to see, or I'd like to show you that okay, we actually do have it, and I wanted I want it displayed on the screen. And to do that, I'm going to use an unordered list. And basically, and each block of data. So essentially, we have an unordered list. Pardon me on that one. An unordered list, and in that we have an each block that says, okay, data.movies. We're gonna take that, and what we essentially want is that for each of them, we're going to have a list item, and the list item is going to map out the name of the movie. And now, what is so cool about this is that if you come here and you look at the types that we specified on the return values that we want, and we come over here to our plus page.spell file, you can see that the types automatically get generated. We don't have to specify types over here again. And it might be mundane to you, but I just absolutely love it. You can see that when we access the singular movie object over here, it has all the properties of a movie result that we specified in our movie result type, and that is just absolutely mind blowing. I just love it. And actually, here, what I just want is the name. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to pop up my terminal, and I'm going to run this with pm run dev, and wait for that to come up a bit. Yeah, and then I'm going to check it out in the browser, see if everything is going perfectly fine. Um, refresh this. Yeah, we're still kind of loading up a bit. Automatic refresh. Let's hope we get our data. Oh, sorry, there's a problem here why we get a list of undefined is because actually movies don't have names, they have titles according to this API. Sorry for that mistake. And yes, we have it. Predator, Green Book, Alien, Covenant, Donnie Darko, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and um 20 20 movies, 20 a list of 20 movies. So basically, you can see that we have that. And basically, if I want to show you the pagination, I could just change anyone. I could change its values, and our list of items would change almost instantaneously. We get Godzilla, and Kong, Kingdom of the Planet Apes, Dune, Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, Kung Fu Panda, whatever, Abigail, and again, a list of 20 movies. Now, uh, of course, this isn't this a list of items isn't what you came into this tutorial looking for. You came into this tutorial looking for a beautifully rendered, beautifully marked up, um, beautifully marked up piece of piece of a website that we have here. And so, in the next section of this video, I'm going to be going about actually styling the movies that we have gotten, and making the cards and making everything look super nice. So if you're still here at this point, I'm assuming that you like my content, and it's been entertaining, and you've been able to follow along, you've learned something. So don't forget to please leave a like. You can do that right now because I don't want you to forget later on. But yeah, please leave a like and subscribe. So now, basically, what we want to do is we want to create the section of this page that has all these cards. But definitely we need to do that with some markup. And in case you didn't know, These cards are actually made using Shadcn-svelte, and Shadcn-svelte is a very nice component library that is a popular part of the React Shadcn UI. And in order to use that card component that Shadcn-svelte provides, we're gonna need to add it to our project. Now we can just go over to the Shadcn-svelte library and come over here to documentation, or rather, we're gonna go to components instead. Let me just make this bigger a bit, and we can see the card at this. Click on this plus card. That's the component that we want to use, and we're gonna copy this and use whatever package manager that you use for your packages. In my case, I use PNM. That's the command to install the card into our project. And we're gonna come over here into our terminal, paste that, and run it. However, I'm not gonna run mine because I actually have downloaded mine already. And add it again. After we're done downloading, we're gonna want to import things. One is we're gonna be importing the card component that we've just downloaded and a variable called image base. And again, I have kept image base in the lib folder in an index.ts file. So the image base variable is the base for every image request. Basically, whenever we return any of these images here that you can see, whenever we make any request for them, this is what always starts the URL for that request for the image. And the API just returns what's supposed to be appended behind it. So instead of having to retype it in everywhere that we wanna call images, I just put it in the index.ts file so that and exported it from there so that we can have access to it in other files throughout the application. Now we've imported the card and image base, and I've made some changes to the markup that was here previously in the plus just file. And now we have a section with a class and some styles in it. It's a flex, it's its display is flex. The width is screen. It's flex wrap, meaning that if I just open this up, the browser tab, if I open this up, you're gonna see that it's flex all right, but it does this funny thing where it puts them in grids and lines them up till they can accommodate the screen. When they can no longer accommodate the screen, it goes to the next line, and so on and so on. On this next line, since there are only two, it leaves them as two. That's what flex wrap actually does. And gap 4 is to just define the spaces at top and at the side of these cards, and justify center. We want all the cards to be in the center of this section. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the markup for the card. Don't worry, it looks a little bit big, but it's nothing to worry about. That's card the root. That's the root of the card, and within that you want content. And there's a lot of styles here. I'm not going to go over a lot of them because not CSS. But as I said, with the image and the image base, you can see that the source attribute for this image tag here is basically saying image base and then movie dot backdrop path. Movie dot the So basically, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add pagination to this application, and of course, again, we're gonna use Shadcn-svelte. Shadcn-svelte provides us with a pagination component that is very good. Does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. You just come in and customize styling. Do a lot, a few touches here, there, here, there. And of course, as we did before with the cards, we head over to Shadcn-svelte's website and go to the page for the pagination component, and we're gonna try to download it. All right, so I'm just gonna click this, copy the command to download the pagination component. I'm using PNPM. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna put it over here. Yeah, let me just scroll this up to the side so you can actually see that. Still looks weird. And basically, you hit run. I don't know why my terminal is doing this way, but I already have mine downloaded anyways, so you can go ahead and download yours. Now, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna import the pagination component, obviously after we downloaded it, and a function called goto from Svelte. The in the navigation, it's a navigation function that Svelte actually provides for us so that we can navigate to things programmatically, because primarily Svelte uses the a tag as a way to navigate within the within our applications, but they also provide this go-to function to say maybe you wanted to navigate to another page after you've done something. It programmatically just gives you more control instead of an a tag. That's what the go-to function is for. So after that, I'm going to create a whole nother div down here and bring in the pagination. Yes, again, this looks like a lot, but not that much, trust me. Basically, what we're going to say is that in our pagination dot root, this is our pagination dot root. We have content and items, and we have previous buttons and next buttons. I've purposely left this blank so that I could show you how to use the go-to function right over here. So basically, we want to create an anonymous function right in here and say go to. It accepts a string as its parameters, and I'm just gonna say home, and then I'm gonna call page dot params per page 20. And so it does the division of total pages of counts divided by total pages, so it knows how many pagination items or pagination buttons that it will create for us to actually exhaust all those items. In this case, let's say we had 40 for our total pages and we did 40 times 20 divided by 20. We would have 40 over here. So that would be the maximum number over here. I'm guessing we have 30. Let's see. Yes, 30 for this is the maximum. 30 times 20 divided by 20 is going to give you 30. So that's how we got that maximum number over here, by doing that simple mathematics. The pages, uh, the pages variable that you see bound to this let here is actually, it just comes with it. It's an array. It just uses it to map. Actually, you could have connected it to an external array, but we didn't do that, so there's no need to go over that too much. And then current page is the current page that the pagination is on, and the sibling count is how many pagination items you want beside each sibling, and then the page is basically the current page, also the specified current page, if I'm correct. Let's go ahead and run this and see how this turns out. Gonna take a while. Taking longer than expected. Now we are in a plus layout.svelte file in the root of our routes folder. Now, if you've been following along with the course, I'm sincerely sorry. There was an error which actually put this plus layout.svelte file within this page number dynamic route. I'm sorry about that. The page number dynamic route will have its layout.svelte file, but where we want to put our global styles is here, so that since layout.svelte files propagate in every route in which they have access to, and in this case we've put it in the root route, the home route. This us importing our global styles will actually import it for all our routes and our plus page.svelte files. So I'm sorry about that. Anyways, if you would notice, we've gone and we've gotten. Now if you look at the carousel as well as these buttons that help us toggle between movie state and series state live live demo of our application, you're gonna see that on our dynamic route, either its state is series or its state is movies. It's always there, which means in turn that this is some sort of shared markup between all dynamic routes. Like if I go ahead and choose like page 2 still has the same trending movies because it's still the same movies that are trending, but now we just have but our dynamic parameter is just set to 2. So essentially the toggle buttons and the carousel are shared layout that are the same throughout the no matter what the dynamic parameter is, no matter what the parameter is, the carousel and the toggle are still going to be the same. Hence, there's no need for them to be in. Now we're in our plus layout.spell file in our dynamic route. We're gonna go ahead and start implementing the toggle buttons. The first thing we're gonna do, of course, is to have a script tag. And in this script tag, we import present view store from the present view store TypeScript file that we specified in our library folder and in our stores folder, also nested in our stores folder. And basically there's a function called handle toggle, and it takes an option, which is a string, and it sets present view store to its option. That's what this line does. And now for some markup, we have ourselves this div that has another div in it. We're gonna see how this markup actually plays out. Let me just split the screen in half. Actually run our application. Gonna take a while. So now we can see our markup over here. We have two buttons. movies and series within a div. Now, what happens is if present view store is equals to movies, we get this orange indicator under the movies, and if it's a series, we get the orange indicator under the series button. Now, both buttons have an on-click function, on-click event handler that runs the handle toggle function. Let me just expand this so you can see a bit more. That runs a handle toggle function, and we provide it the options of movies and series dependent on which button we are pressing. And then if you looked at the implementation of the handle toggle function, whatever option we pass to it is what it sets as the present view store. That's why this changes. Now we're going to go ahead and fetch the data that we need for our carousel in the layout. Now, I've already prepared this file for you. We're just going to go through the code that's in this. So we're importing a type movie result from the lib directory in types. We specified that earlier and used it. So by now you are quite familiar with it. Next, we will be importing our API key, environment variables, and we've defined this header object much like before, accepts application JSON, and the authorization is basically our API key. Now we export the load function, which we know will run whenever our layout gets mounted. We define two variables that are not populated after we have data. We request for the movies, the trending movies via this API route and pass in our header object as the headers option on the option object for the fetch. We do the same thing for series, and in a try catch block, we say, all right, we have different these two different requests or requests, and we both want both of them to come simultaneously. We're using promise.all. Again, we're using promise.all to serialize the JSON that we come back with and turn it into normal JavaScript object. Now, if you didn't know, as I said before, promise.all returns an array. That's why we are using array syntax. Basically say, hey, request 0 is pointing to the trending movie request, and 1 is trending series. And we go ahead, serialize that JSON and turn it into JavaScript. We then assign values to the variables that were created up above and put the file inadvertently. Then we assign values to these trending movies, and once we've gotten the results from our new promise.all, as it also returns another array with all our data. There's a catch block which basically does nothing, says console.log error, and we return trending movies as the trending movies variable, trending series as the trending series variable. Then we use type coercion to say, hey, I want this returned as an object that has this trending movies property to be an array of movie results, and quite the same for trending series. Now, for the next thing, we're going to be using this data to create the carousel. It's going to be to download the carousel component from the Shadcn-svelte library. We can go ahead over to their website and check out the plan to get that done and add carousel. I'm going to copy this any package manager of your choice. Yeah, we're gonna come into our terminal, run that, paste it, and you tap enter, run. Now, as you know, I already got mine, so I'm not gonna. After you've installed your carousel component, go ahead and import it. Next thing we're gonna import. Now, mind you, this is the plus layout.spell file in our dynamic route. So you've imported your carousel component. Except import the card component because basically, let me open up our live preview. We open up our live preview, we see that the carousel is just this element that slides. However, the card is what displays this image and this div where there's this key tag and button that shows the title of the movie and the watch trailer button, which basically redirects us to a movie page. But we're not going to talk about that now. I'm just trying to understand the underlying markup behind. After we've imported the card component, next thing we're going to do is import image base. You've used this before. I don't have to go over it so much. And then we're going to do some state. You know, we're going to import. Okay, we already have present view store. And basically, this is a reactive tag. You don't know what this is. It's it tracks any stateful value that we have and re-renders this whole block whenever any of the stateful value changes. Now, in Svelte 5, this is actually getting depreciated, but unfortunately, I built this project with Svelte 4. And if you want to see more Svelte content, including Svelte 5, it would be a very nice time to leave a subscription, a like, a comment, just something for the YouTube algorithm to say, hey, this guy actually puts out good content. So we run this if check to see if present view store is post movies and if we have our data, which is the which is our layout data that gets returned from plus layout dot server, and we're gonna check if we have that. Now, if we have that, we're gonna we're gonna assign this variable that doesn't actually initially have any value. We're gonna assign it to the movies array that we have in the layout data, and if it's series, if the present view store is equals to series, we're gonna assign trending list into data.trending series. And the last step is we actually have this huge, might look daunting, but there's nothing special about it. It's just a Shadcn-svelte component that says carousel root and the content. And basically, what we're gonna do is map through trending list and and uh, and render for each member of the trending list array. We're gonna render a carousel item, and for the carousel item, in that we have a div that has a card. As I said before, the card is where the image, the div, the p tag that has the title, and that link that takes us to a movie page. It's all in here. Now, this is automatically stateful because of our stateful block that we'd already put here. Whenever this changes from the present view store changes from movies to series, the value of trending list changes. And so, therefore, what gets mapped in the carousel changes. Now, we can see that in our live preview. If I was to go ahead and change the view store to series, immediately we get series. The first thing we saw was Doctor Who. I'm sure if there's anyone from the UK watching, you know that's a series. We can go ahead. South Park. It's a very great one. We all know it's a series. Dark Matter. But yeah, you just get what I'm coming from. We already have that data. Depending on this Depending on the present view store, we use it to map what the trending. We use it to decide what the trending list is, and then map whatever values the trending list is to carousel items. Now, a lot enough talk. Let's actually run this code and see if everything works as specified. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a quick refresh. And of course, we actually do get our carousel in all of its stunning beauty. Now, from the get-go, you can actually move. We can we can move to the next one whenever we tap the next button, or go to the previous whenever we tap the previous button. But there's something missing, of course. You looked at the live demo properly, you're gonna see that the carousel just switches by itself seamlessly. To do that, we're gonna come back to the Shadcn-svelte documentation and see what they say about that. See, the carousel component in Shadcn-svelte is built using the Embla carousel library. We can go ahead over to their documentation, how we can get it done, how we can get auto scroll to happen on the carousel. Come over here to plugin. Now we're going to go to plugins, and in plugins in the drop down you can see autoplay. We clicked on start over here in the Embla carousel documentation. You're going to see that the carousel here, preview carousel that they've put, starts to scroll. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. How they did this was via this package, a plugin that we just, as the name says, plug in to our carousel component. Works. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. We're going to copy this, and we're gonna install this plugin, autoplay plugin from Embla Carousel. We're gonna stop our development server. We're gonna paste that in, and we're gonna run that. As you know, I already have mine, so just wait for yours to install, and then next we're gonna import the the autoplay plugin and use it in our carousel component. Import autoplay from Embla Carousel, and we're gonna put this plugins attribute on the root of the carousel component, and then specify autoplay, some sort of function that has its parameter as an options object, and we've set our delay to 2500, which means that it's gonna be 2.5 seconds or 2500 milliseconds before the carousel slides to the next index. We've set jump to true, stop on mouse enter is equals to true, and that means that whenever we hover onto the carousel, it's going to stop moving indexes. It's going to stay stationary because the user might want to admire the picture or just get a little bit of context, and they don't want to be chasing the index about. And then jump true is just to add a transition so that the movement is really smooth. Now we have our application running, and we can quickly check that out. Live preview. One we're currently building, kind of see if everything works right. Of course, it moves very sleekly. And now, if I were to hover onto this with my mouse, it's not going to move. Definitely, as long as I stay on this carousel component, it's not going to move. And if I go off, continue sliding. I'm pretty sure you're starting to see the usefulness of Shadcn-svelte. It really does make developing websites like this, components that are already ready to use, ready to go, just makes development a breeze. Now, there's one more thing I do want to point out that I think I glossed over in my explanation. Is we're seeing this in this title and in this href some sort of ternary operation, like what's going on. Basically, here is the p tag that holds the title of the movie or series that's on the present card in the carousel. Now, basically, what's the saying is if our present view story is equal to movies, we want to show the item, what we destructure a trending list as, and say we want its original title. And if it's not movies, that means it's series, we want its original name. Why we're doing that is because the API returns some properties differently for movies and some properties different for series. A movie has a title, whereas a series has a name. If I were to leave this without this ternary operator, I just put item just dot original title. Whenever present view store changes series, this is going to return undefined. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that. I'm just going to demonstrate that real quick here and remove. Now, if I come over here, it's going to refresh. If I come over here and toggle this to series, I'm going to get undefined for every single title or name of a series, and vice versa. If I were to put name instead of title, I would get undefined for all the movie names, and so that's why we need that ternary operator there. And last but not least, in the a tag, our href is also conditional. If present view story is equals to movies, we want to, whenever we click on that watch trailer button or that watch trailer link, we want to navigate to movies. If the present view story is movies, we want to navigate to a specific movie, and if it's not, we want to navigate to a specific series. Now, we haven't created this page that actually holds specific information for movies or series, but of course we're going to create that quite soon. I just felt like I should point that out so that you don't get confused. Nothing special at all. Next, we're going to be creating markup for our Now, looking at our live preview, we can see that moviebox and this impute box right over here in a header that we have up above the screen, and it follows us around no matter how far we scroll down. And unsurprisingly enough, it's a header, so it's present on every page. And if it's present on every page, does that mean that we have to write the markup for the header on every single page? Well, no. Svelte-kit actually provides us a way of doing this, and it's called a layout file. We haven't spoken much about it, but figured it's time. Now, a layout component will render, a layout file will render for every page that is in its directory. Any page that exists in its directory, or any directory that's nested in that directory, it's actually going to render for this. Now, if you look at this import for app.css where all our styles exist, and this is, let me collapse this page does felt this layout does felt is in the root of the routes component. So that means every other route exists within this route component, and this layout is at the root of all of them. So it gets rendered for all of them, and that's why this, and also the JavaScript that is in this script tag also runs for all of them. That's why this import for our styles automatically waters the styles down. And we can also include markup, and every single page that gets rendered is going to have that markup. As what we if we as opposed to what happened here in the dynamic route for page number, where we specify the layout.svelte file, it rendered for the page in here, but there are no further routes in page number. So this layout is not going to render for all of them, for any other thing other than the dynamic route, as opposed to the layout.svelte file that is in the root of the routes component. So it's going to render for every single route that is in the routes component. It gets a little tricky, but you will get used to it as time goes on, as you actually use this. Now, enough talking, and let's make this work. So actually download we're going to download the Shadcn-svelte component for imputes. You can just come over here to the Shadcn-svelte website and copy this command and use the package manager of choice, pnpm, and you come into your command line and paste that in and run it. Now, as you know, I've already got mine, so I will not be running this again, and I will go ahead and actually implement this. Now, we're importing the input component from Shadcn-svelte and a search icon from this library called Lucid-svelte. Now, we don't have to download this again. Lucid-svelte is a Shadcn-svelte dependency. So whenever we initialize Shadcn-svelte or download Shadcn-svelte into a Svelte project, Lucid-svelte automatically gets downloaded for us. We're going to specify this query variable that's going to be used as the value of our input box. And we proceed to describe the header and put the button inside of it. Now, as you know, I'm not one to go over styles and markup. This is not HTML and CSS. If you want these styles and markup, I advise that you just copy and paste it, and then the JavaScript, you actually write the JavaScript and the spell with me as long as you go. So now we're gonna go ahead and run that and see if everything is okay. And now we have moviebox up top with a very not visible text box. But we're gonna change that when we actually, well, that's not gonna be a problem when we change the background color of our entire homepage to the blue that is in our live preview. It's very nice blue, and I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. And to change the background, I'm gonna come into our app.html file. Now, usually you're not really supposed to interact with this, but I want the background to be the same for every single page in this this application. And so I'm gonna change the background color of the body, which contains every other page in this application, and I'm gonna say BG Slate 900, and that's gonna change our background color to slate shade of 900, and we should get a change here for the background color in a jiffy. That's it. Everything looks good, and our pagination component is also for the first time visible, and I'd like to use that, see what we get. Got a new set of movies. We're on page now. You can move up to page 3. Good. Reload changed, and we can go on and on. Click next and next and next. And so basically, we're done with our first page of this application. Nice, everything. Well, geez, everything is nice. So, like, oh, right? Actually, change this to series. I'm getting undefined for my titles. Not supposed to be. And again, I must have left out that in our plus page as file, when we actually map through and change the content of movie list, and map through it, I must have forgotten to use ternary operator. Oh, oh, what's getting mapped is data.movies instead of movie list. So sorry for that mistake. Essentially, movie list is a variable. It's not. It doesn't have a value at first, and then we run this reactive block every time present view store changes. Whenever we change it from present view store, whenever we change the present view store from movies to series, we change the contents of movie list and then render movie list with each as a card. Every item in the movie list array as a card. Now I told you before that there are some differences between how movies and series get returned from the API. And if we use data.movies as the only thing that we were actually mapping through, we wouldn't be having the name, we wouldn't have the movie.name property on any of the objects that are in the movie array, and that's why we were getting undefined. Now everything should be working fine if I change from series. Exactly. I get the titles. We're on series now. If I change back to movies, we get the titles, and if I change back to series, we also get the names of the series. So sorry for that, but I just we had to put that in. Now, actually, there's one more thing that our Discover page might need. If we go to our live preview and we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we see this footer over here. And this footer, as well as the header, is present on every single page in our application. And so it should go to the plus layout.svelte file in the root of the route application. It is simple markup, conditions of use, privacy policy, and press room. They do nothing. And you can go ahead and insert your name when you're building your project here instead of mine. But since this is mine, I'm going to put mine. And make sure you don't forget that, because if you're gonna put this project on your portfolio and you don't actually put your name, well, you're gonna seem a little bit less trustworthy. So now let's get over there and put in that markup for the header, for the footer rather. Great. Now it's nothing special. You should get a hang of it, but you should understand what we have just done. This slot is just saying that our application is going to be running in the middle, and the layout markup is going to be on opposite sides of it, rather top and bottom, the header and the footer. And the styles complement each other, so there's no overflow or any of that stuff. The styles just complement each other perfectly. Now we're going to run our development server and see for ourselves if everything is going well. Go ahead and refresh this. There, we can go ahead and scroll to the bottom, and we have our footer over here. Very nice looking. Now, the next thing we're going to be implementing is something. What happens when we click on the cards? Ideally, if we opened our live demo, when we click on a card, we get redirected to a page for the movie that was on that card. But in our application, we haven't created that page yet. So whenever we actually click on this card, we're going to get redirected to a route that doesn't exist, and we're going to get a 404 not found. And that's not a good thing. So let's fix it. Alright, so we're in our live demo of the application, and I'd like to point out something to you. Now, if you take a look at this, I'm in the movie. Presently, our view store is equals to movies, and if I click on a card, it's gonna take me to a movie page for a specific movie. And so on this page, we have this video tag, or it's actually an iframe that connects to YouTube. We have a title. We have this drop down where we can use to select videos for this iframe. You can see that that video has changed. We have this paragraph tag over here where we can have a plot summary of the movie. We have this cast. We have this cast and producers H1s, and then divs or spans where we actually map through the cast or whoever acted this movie and whatever they acted is as their role in the movie, and the producers of this movie. Now, and of course over here at the side we get recommendations for movies that are quite similar to this movie, The Idea of You. Now, if I were to do something similar, say go over to series, and if I clicked on a series, I would get very much the same layout but with different data. But these are two different dynamic routes. So how do we do that? Well, in Svelte-kit there's the concept of groups, and groups enable us to make two routes, share data, and share layout, depending on what we want. So I can make a plus page.server.ts file if I wanted it. If I wanted a plus page.server.ts file to run for two routes, and I wanted them to have the same layout, I could make a group. Those are the two scenarios where you can make a group. And in this case, well, we have ourselves two different routes with the exact same markup, So we definitely need a group for both of them. And that's exactly what we're going to do. In our code editor, Visual Studio Code, and right here, this is how you create a group. So basically what I'm saying is that in this group, the movies and the series routes are both going to share something. And now when we're using the URL in the browser, if we were to say or try to navigate to home/content, we would get a 404 not found. So we've essentially Svelte-kit skips this, and the only renderable things are movies and series, the movie and series routes. However, we're gonna go a step further and create a new folder in both these routes, and we're gonna be calling it ID. And we're gonna do that for series also. New folder ID. Now, as you've seen, I've created it with square brackets, meaning that it's a dynamic route. And we're going to probably be using that route to fetch data or something, which is exactly what we did in the live preview. The data that we fetch is dependent on the ID of the movie. And the next thing, obviously, every route needs a page, a plus page.svelte file to get rendered. So let's go ahead and do that. And for the second one, after we've created the plus page.svelte file in both routes, the next thing we're going to do is create a layout.server.ts file in this content group. .ts file. Good. Now this is the file that's going to be fetching data for both of these routes. And of course, since we want these routes to share some sort of layout, we're going to need a plus layout.svelte file. We can just go ahead and do some of the boilerplate. We're sure we're going to need a script tag, and a slot. Next, we're going to be working with our layout.server.ts file. And we're going to be, the first thing we're going to do is import the type movie result. We've seen that before. And another type called cast or crew. It's a type that I created over here. It's just, this is how, or some of the fields that get returned from when we fetch data for the cast of crew on a movie. This is how the objects get returned. The known for department, property is a string, the character is a string, and so on and so on. You can go back here and let me continue explaining this. Now I'm sure you've started to see this snippet a lot. Const header equals to accept and authorization fields, application.json, and bearer, our API key. And that's just for the options object on our fetch request. Now we have quite a bit of variables without any initial value in our load function, and in our load function you can see that we destructure URL and parameters. Now load functions have access to these things called URLs and and parameters. The URL is the URL that's requesting data. So if we were to move to any page like /movies/ID, that's where we're trying to navigate to. That's what's going to be this URL, and it's obviously a string. And the parameters is, it gets returned as, what is the, if this is a dynamic route, what is the present parameter? That's going to be a number. Let me just show you in our live preview. This would be our parameter. And that's what the load function has access to. So we say if URL the path name includes movies, that's basically saying we're checking if we're navigating to a movie route, and we're gonna fetch all this data. We're gonna fetch all this data from the different endpoints that we need. Now this is for the data for the movie, just the overview of the movie, the plot summary. These are the credits, meaning the cast and the crew. The videos, which is that list of videos in the pop down that you can use to have that iframe that connects to YouTube, and the recommendations. Now all of these come from different APIs. Trust me, I wish I could have bundled them all into one, but I actually have to do this fetch multiple times. And we use the same header component header header object in our headers for our fetch request. And if this is series, because obviously if it's not movies, it's gonna be series, then what we want to do is say we're gonna fetch for the exact same amount of things. We need the movie summary, the credits for the series, the videos the series has, like trailers and stuff, and recommendations related to the series. But these have different endpoints on the API. There are different endpoints for movies and there are different endpoints for series. Hence, they need to do this. Then there's a try catch block, and all we're doing is just basically extracting out all that data. I still use promise.all because we want all of these to go and come back all at once. It's a method that helps with, and then we're just destructuring all of this, and we're saying, okay, movie or series is equals to all the responses 0, which is from the from here, all parse responses. We're just extracting data basically, and once we actually do get our data back, and we do this thing where we say that we want the crew, which we actually do return from our load function. I'm trying to filter it out because I don't want all the crew. There's a lot of crew that goes into the production of a movie. Now, I want to filter out for members who are members of the crew who are producers. And so I create this function, this callback function on the filter, which says for every object, which is a crew member, and it's of type cast or crew, we want we're gonna be using we're gonna be checking if their job, because there's a job property on the crew member object, and we're gonna be checking if their job is equals to executive producer or their job is equals to producer. And then that's what crew gets evaluated as. And the cast is just basically everybody that the cast the cast returns from credits this credits object. And we return all those variables, and we use a little type coercion to say exactly what the types that we want. Next, in our layout.svelte file, we're going to actually consume this data and use it for markup. Now, before we actually go ahead with implementing the layout, I'm going to take us back to our live demo once again. And you can see that on this page, we have this thing that pops out an array of stuff that we could pick. It's actually called a select component. And we're going to be using Shadcn-svelte, I promise. We've been downloading a lot of stuff, but okay, I'm not going to promise. I think we still need to download the avatar component over here too. So yeah, we need to download the avatar component also. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the select, and I'm going to paste that in over here. Don't run that yet because we can just run both simultaneously, and we're going to go over to avatar, the avatar component, and get that. The way I say avatar, you're gonna think it's Ang or something. All right, and we're also gonna paste that in. Now, as you know, I already have mine, so I'm not gonna be running that command again. But you can go ahead and run yours. All right, now that we've actually downloaded our select and card components, we can actually go ahead and import them into our plus layout.svelte file. You can see that I've done that over here. We're importing image base and we're importing the page store from Svelte-kit. The page store basically has a lot of information about the current page that we're on, including its path name, its URL, stuff like that. You're gonna see it in use. Now I've created a function, video toggle, takes that actually just changes this piece of state over here, this present video key, and its data, the videos, the index one dot key, and basically what happens is that, let me show you in the live preview. We when the videos data returns from the video API, we're gonna get an array of videos, and there are a lot. We don't know which one the user wants, so by default, we're gonna take the first object in the video array, and that's gonna be the key for our iframe. But whenever the user toggles the select and changes that, we want this state to change. Now I can go over here and show you. Yeah, if I click this, there's a pop down, and I can just change this, and the iframe is going to change because it's reactive. Changed. Now, we haven't actually implemented the layout for that, but I'm just trying to give you a quick rundown of what's going on there. Now, the next thing is also another function called format runtime. Now, if we're on a movie, we're gonna get a runtime when we get our data. If we're on a movie page, we're gonna get a runtime when we get our data. But we don't just want to say 260 minutes. Like, you could say that, but I wanted to make it more, user friendly. Let's say 2 hours, 30 minutes, that sort of stuff. So this is a function that takes minutes. Let's say you're passing 200 minutes, and it's going to figure out how many hours and minutes are in that. And how we do that is by defining this function, variable, this constant called hours, and we're gonna do math.floor minutes divided by 60. So if this is 120 divided by 60, we're gonna get 2. And math.floor is going to return the greatest integer less than or equal to, meaning the number that's closest to the, like, rounded down to the bottom. Let's say 2.3. 2.3 gets rounded down into 2. So if I was to pass in 210 divided by as the minutes, and I divide that by 60, we're still going to get 2 because of the math floor. But in reality, it's more like 2.05, something like that. But we're going to get 2 because of the math floor is actually rounding down to the nearest whole number. Now, to the nearest whole number. Now, remaining minutes, I'm saying minutes mod 60. So minutes mod 60, this is the modulo operator, and basically how modulos work is we want the remainder. Like, if I were to divide an object by 60, how many times would 60 go? And then after the amount of times that 60 could go, what's the remainder? In the case of 210, as we said before, 60 can go 3 times, and then we'd be left with 30 minutes. And this that's what this is going to get evaluated as. Remaining minutes is going to get evaluated at 30, because that's what will happen when you do the modulo operation. And so we create another variable, which is formatted runtime, which is supposed to be a string. And we then say if the hours are greater than 0, which is this, if it's greater than 0, we want formatted runtime to be equal plus equals to, which means we're assigning to that string hours plus h. And if remaining minutes are greater than 0, we're going to say formatted runtime is equals to string plus remaining minutes plus minutes. And then we're going to return the formatted runtime. So basically what's going to happen is this. If we don't have, if let's say our remaining minutes are just 0, it's just 0. So this isn't going to run. And if this was, let's say 1, what we're going to get was 1 hour, 1h. Now let me just show you this in the live preview. Now we can go to a movie. We're saying 2h 1 minute. Now you can see how this actually does get returned, and now maybe I can help you put this a little bit more into context. So if this is greater than 2, if the hours we have is greater than 2, we're gonna append the amount of hours that we actually have plus h into this string. If remaining minutes is also greater than 0, we're gonna append the remaining minutes plus minutes and this space so that there can be some sort of gap. That's the gap that you see here. If I were to remove that that space in between these two quotation marks, then the hours and the minutes would be side by side. And that's why that's there. And so that's how we basically format the runtime for a movie. That's a function that does that. And to format the release here, we're using the JavaScript split method on a string. So basically, the movie the date for release for a series or a movie comes out something like this: 2024. Let's say 01/13. And so we're saying, hey, I want you to cut this string that gets returned at the first point where you see this dash in the string, and everything before that dash, I want you to return it for me. And that's basically how format release here works. And yeah, that's an explanation for all the JavaScript that will be running in this layout. Now it's time to actually work with some markup. So basically, in a route folder, if there is no if a file is in a plus page.felt file, a plus layout.server file, or any page file or data fetching file, it's going to get ignored by Svelte-kit. So a good thing that you can do is, let's say you have a component that only gets used by a route, or you have a JavaScript file that only gets used by a specific route. It's not a bad idea to actually put that component into into this into this folder of your route. And now that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna create a new component called avatar.svelte, and we're gonna put it in this content folder because it actually doesn't get used by any other route, and it's not a bad idea, and it's just gonna get skipped by Svelte because it's not a data fetching file, or it's not a page file. It actually doesn't get rendered to your screen unless it gets imported into a page or a layout. Now we're gonna start by defining what this component is gonna need to render. We will import the image base as we've done so many times in this video, and we're gonna import the avatar component from Shadcn-svelte. We're gonna import that over there, and we're gonna say that hey, there are only three things that this component needs. That's profile path, original name, and the name of the character. And so in Svelte-kit, this is how you actually define component properties, or rather, this is how we used to define component properties. As at Spell 5, this syntax is actually going to get depreciated, and I'm going to be making videos about that very soon in the future, where projects where we actually do build with Spell 5. But if you do like my content, please just subscribe and like so that I could actually be encouraged to make something with Spell 5. Okay, now onto explanation. This is just markup really, and we're saying okay for the image. Yeah, there's some JavaScript there. Okay, for the image, I'm saying I want the image base is the base again, and the profile path is the string that completes the URL for the image that we're gonna fetch. And for the alt, we've said picture of whatever the person who has this profile path's name is. And then in the p tag, we're gonna actually put their name, and the cast have character names. However, the crew does not, and that's why this the original value for character is none. It's a default value. And whenever we call this, we can specify a value aside none. And then that's why we do this JavaScript over here that says if the character string is not equals to none, then we're gonna have these two small tags that says as and character. So now I'm gonna show you that in the live preview. You can see Zoe Kravitz in the movie Mad Max Fury Road from 2015 as Toast the Knowing. Obviously she acted this movie, she's part of the cast, and she had a character with a name, and that's why this actually got rendered. But if you look at the producers, Doug Mitchell isn't part of the cast, and hence that's why there's no as, and of course no character name. So that works pretty fine. So now we're gonna import the avatar component that we just created, not the one from Shadcn-svelte, the one that we just created. See that this is coming from the same directory, and it's coming from a Svelte file. Now we can go ahead and talk about the markup for this page. Basically, our big um, div that renders the YouTube video is a card component, Shadcn-svelte, and its source is based on the present video key, which is a stateful value. So whenever that gets changed by that select component, changes. Now a lot of this is just slotting values of the data that we get, the title, like title of the movie, runtime, ECR, stuff like that. And this is the select, also a component from Shadcn-svelte. It pops down, and with that we can actually pick a present video key, and then that will cause our iframe to re-render. Get a new video that we can essentially watch from YouTube. Now, if you're not familiar with iframes are a HTML element that actually, know, they take a piece from another website. It's very popular for use of embedding YouTube videos into other websites because YouTube basically has unlimited storage. So if you were creating a small project and let's say you didn't want to provision your own video servers, you could post those videos onto YouTube and then embed them into your project. Then finally, in our span, within two spans, we actually map through this avatar component. Say, hey, if it we take the data from the layout data that we've returned, we destructure with cast or crew, and then map through and give it properties that it needs. You can see that we did not specify character because the crew won't have any character. name, and so it gets default as a none. Then with this if check that we run here, this small these two small HTML elements don't get rendered at all. That's it. I feel like that's all we need to go over in this. And congratulations. Let's run these. I think you've actually built your first Svelte project. Now, I'm a bit sparse on the typing. I feel all of that wastes time. If there's anything that you might not be able to understand yourself, that's the only thing that I'm gonna explain. If you don't like the tutoring this way, you could always say it, but I believe in being fast as possible. Going on. Our development start server hasn't started yet. Now that we've actually done this specific movie page, there is something left. Now, if you copied the markup from the GitHub repository, that's obviously in the description of this video below. If you copy the markup exactly, you're gonna realize that I actually use Tailwind styles, specific fonts rather that we have not imported. Like you can just go into basically the header component over here, and in its class declaration for moviebox, you're gonna see that we used some font called DM Sans. Now we haven't actually brought that in. And over here, I'm seeing these ridiculous scroll bars, and I don't like seeing them at all. But I don't want to see the scroll bars on anywhere in the application, period. So in our global app.css file, we're going to be importing two fonts that we used. One is DM Sans, and actually they're both in the Sans family, and the other one is Poppins. And we're also going to be we're also going to be saying, you know what, down at the bottom, I don't want any scroll bars, any display for the scroll bars. WebKit scroll bar display none, CSS style. And there you go. We don't have any scroll bars anymore, and this is starting to look very good. Now you're gonna notice that the font didn't actually change. So what we're gonna do is, as we've imported these fonts over up here at the top, we actually have to specify them in our tailwind.config.ts file, which is configuration file for Tailwind, and we have to tell it that okay, we have some imported fonts, and within this font family object here, you can come over down and put in DM Sans and Poppins, and you're gonna prefix DM Sans and Poppins, and now we don't even have to say anything, and actually all the font has changed, and it's starting to look more like the font on the preview. Now it's not only the screen because it's the global CSS file, and if we navigate backwards, we're gonna see that everything on the website now actually has one of these fonts, either Poppins or DM Sans. Now again, if we look at our demo application, we have this our live demo application. We have this input box over in the header where we can search for movies and series. So if I go ahead and typed in Mad Max and clicked on the search button, I get a list of Mad Max movies, and I could navigate from there onto the specific Mad Max page. Now, presently in our application, we don't have that running, so we're gonna set that up. But I want you to take a few things into consideration first. Now, to make any request on this API that we're using for the movies, we need our API key. sure you've seen that a lot of times, where when we're making the header to actually fetch the data from the API, we always need this header object, and we always need this authorization, with the bearer being our API key. And our API key is a secret key. So we can't just fetch this from the front end and say, you know what, use JavaScript, and in the layout and click, whenever we click, we're gonna fetch from the client side and actually have that data back. We can't do that because our environment variable is a secret one. So it has to be on a server. But then, is it gonna be on a layout server? Do we use form actions? Remember, this header is in the root layout.svelte file. So that means if you were gonna pick layout.server.ts file, it would have to be in the root of the application. But the problem is, with using that, with using the layout.server.ts file, that file is gonna run every time we come into this application, and that's not actually very performant because we don't need the search data unless the user wants it. It's not something that we have to fetch automatically. So Svelte-kit actually does provide us with something that solves this issue quite well, and it's called an API route. And an API route is basically a server. It's if you've built an Express application with Node.js, where you basically just return data with JSON, it's exactly the same thing. It's not linked to any page. It does not run in any on when any page is fetched. It just is its own thing. It lives there like it's a server. And when we can ping to it like a normal server, like fetch stuff from it, and it's gonna return it back. But it doesn't do so automatically. We have to do it manually. And so let's implement that. First of all, I'm gonna come over here in our routes folder, and I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm gonna call it search. Within search, I'm gonna create a new file, and we're gonna call it a plus server.ts file. And that's how you create a, an API route. Just a normal route, but inside of it we have a plus server.ts file. This plus server.ts file code is what's gonna run every time we're gonna request for this API. Next, we're actually gonna make the function that handles the. Now we're in our plus server.ts file, and the first thing we're gonna do is import this JSON thingy from svelte.js / kit. Now, it's nothing special really. It's just to turn whatever data that we want to return into JSON so we can consume on the client side. It's nothing special. Of course, we're importing um our API key from our environment variables. And next, we're gonna define our header as usual. And then, before I go any further, I want you to know that API routes can expose functions that corroborate or coincide with the the fetch actions or the fetch methods that we could use. That's post, get, put, patch, all the verbs we can create with all the verbs. And if I were to fetch, if I were to make a method, I could have multiple I could have multiple request handlers that return data, but they're gonna run based off of what method we specified in our fetch request. So if we specified post, we're gonna have a we're gonna have the post. We specified post when we pinged to this search route. It's the post request function that's gonna get run, and it's gonna return data. Now enough with that. Let's get into something else. So this is actual. We're gonna make this a post handler because we're gonna be sending a query over to this server, and then the server is gonna do some stuff and send us some data back. Now we're gonna go over this. What this is? This is it's an asynchronous function, obviously, and we have access to the request object, and we're gonna say let processed search result array, which is an array that has already been processed. We're gonna instantiate it, but it doesn't have any values. And then we're gonna say that our query, which is whatever movie that the user is asking for, is we're gonna wait for it from this request and basically turn it into an actual string because it's a string. We're gonna send this over in JSON format, so we have to turn it back into an actual string, and then query gets that value. And then after that's been completed, to fetch. We're gonna try to fetch whatever movie or series that the user has asked for with that query string. And here's the route to do so. And you can see that in this the route parameters for this API, we're passing the query as the query string that we've gotten. The request is obviously gonna come back with some data. We're gonna turn it into a normal JavaScript object, and we specify a type here. I didn't actually create an actual type for this because I don't know. I just didn't. It's an object, as you can see, and it has some properties on it. The result object, and the result is an array of objects that have original name, media type, backdrop path, and ID. ID is a number, backdrop path is a string, media type is either a TV or movie, and that's how we know whether we've gotten back a movie or a series. Series obviously has its media type as TV, while movie has its as a movie. Now, oftentimes, depending on how similar the names of the movies are, we could get up to five, six, seven, eight responses from this query API, and we don't want that because if you checked our live demo and you saw how it was when it ran, you can see that there's not a lot of space to map through 8, 9, 10 movies. That's gonna block out the whole screen, and we don't want to do that. We want like three of the movies. And basically, the farther you go downwards, the less likely it is that that's the movie that the individual, the user, is actually searching for. So we're gonna filter, and also this API returns persons. So if I search for a keyword, it could return a movie, a series, or a person like Angelina Jolie. But we don't want that. We want only movies and series. So the first step in cleaning this data as we get it is to say, you know what, the search response and the results from the search response, I want to filter that out. So we're using the filter method on this array, and we're saying if the media type is equals to TV or is equal to movie, you return that. So every object that has its media type that's equals to TV or equals to movie will get pushed into an array, and that array will be the value of step one array. And then finally, we will actually set process search results array into. We're gonna give it a value, and how we do that is we take the step one array that has only movies and series, and we splice it. We basically say everything after index 2, which is 0, 1, 2. After everything after index 2 start at 0, count 0, 1, and 2, and everything after index 2 basically just cut that off. And now if what's coming from step 1 array is not actually up to 3, let's say we have only 2 movies, is actually just going to return 2 movies. No problems at all. It's not going to return an error. And then again, we use some type coercion. It's the same type from over here. and say, okay, this is what I actually want to return this as. And then we do a catch block where we all we just say is if this fails, return JSON and status is equals to search failed. And if everything is all right, return JSON process search array. And what's going to be in that JSON is the process search result array and with a status of 200. Now let's actually make the request from the front end. Now we're in our root layout.svelte file, just as we left it uh, with our input and our header. And basically, we're gonna go ahead to define some stateful values. First is process search result array. I use the same variable name as on the server. That doesn't actually mean anything. And this is highlighted in red because, oh, we have not actually specified that our script tag is supposed to be in TypeScript. Now that should go away. And yeah, that actually does go away. So we have some pretty self-explanatory variables. Error has occurred, query results ready, and searching. Now error has occurred. We're fetching data, so this should be we're going to be fetching data. Whenever query results fail, we want error has occurred to be true. Query results ready should be true whenever we actually have our results and they're good. And searching should be false when we're not searching and true when we are searching. Now query is bound to the value of the input box. We did that much earlier when we actually created our plus layout.svelte file. Next, we're going to create a function called search. Sorry about that. Next, we're going to create a function called search, obviously asynchronous. And we're going to say let search request is equals await fetch search. Now, as you can see, we're trying to fetch data from our API route in our application. And now this is how you do it. It's a relative route. Uh, uh, If I were trying to fetch data from any other route, it would probably look something like HTTPS domain name domain name But no, actually, Svelte-kit is made it in such a way that we don't have to do that, and the route is actually relative. So all we have to do is just put forward slash in front of the search, and we can actually get data from it. And the method is post, and if you can remember, in our plus server.cs file, the function that we created, the request handler function that we created is post. It's supposed to handle post requests, and that's what we're gonna do. That's what it's going to do. That's why we make the method here post. So if I were to make this get or put, this post function wouldn't actually work. So the body of this, as if you've worked with any API, you know that if you're gonna use the post verb, you actually have to send some data out to the server. And how we do that is with this body property of our options object. And so what we're gonna send is the query, but we're gonna turn it into JSON. We're stringifying the JSON. We're stringifying the query into JSON. Now, if you remember, query is the value of the input box, and so that's what we're trying to send over to the server, so that the server actually fetches the data for that movie or that series and returns it. Next is headers. We just want we set content type application.json, meaning that we're going to be expecting JSON to return. Now we have a simple try-catch block. We're going to say that there's a variable called search response, and we're going to make it wait for search request.json to actually complete. That is the value of search request. We're trying to turn it into actual JavaScript object. And if you remember, when we were returning our JSON, we specified in the object over here processed search result array. So that's one of the properties when our JSON gets returned. And so that's what we access here when we say search response dot process search result dot array, because that's one of the properties that's actually on the search response object, and we set it to our process search result array on the client. That's what we're going to use to map out data. If the try block is running, that means everything went well. The query results are ready, and so we set that to true, and we searching equals false because we're done searching. Actually, the first thing we actually did in this function, I forgot to point that out, was make searching true. So we're trying to say, okay, we're going to go out and fetch this data, and while all this is running, searching is going to be true, and we're going to be using that to display some loading, state. Then we have a simple catch block that says, okay, if an error has occurred, set error has occurred equals true, and searching is equals false, because actually, even if an error has occurred, we're no longer searching. Well, let's go ahead and implement our or use our function. And how we're going to do that is the button that has that search icon in it. We're going to put an on click event listener on it and say every time someone clicks this, you run search. And then let's just spice this up a little bit. Let's say console.log processed search result array. I'm going to go ahead and run this. Now we're in our root layout.svelte file, just as we left it uh, with our input and our header. And basically, we're gonna go ahead to define some stateful values. First is process search result array. I use the same variable name as on the server. That doesn't actually mean anything. And this is highlighted in red because, oh, we have not actually specified that our script tag is supposed to be in TypeScript. Now that should go away. And yeah, that actually does go away. So we have some pretty self-explanatory variables. Error has occurred, query results ready, and searching. Now error has occurred. We're fetching data, so this should be we're going to be fetching data. Whenever query results fail, we want error has occurred to be true. Query results ready should be true whenever we actually have our results and they're good. And searching should be false when we're not searching and true when we are searching. Now query is bound to the value of the input box. We did that much earlier when we actually created our plus layout.svelte file. Next, we're going to create a function called search. Sorry about that. Next, we're going to create a function called search, obviously asynchronous. And we're going to say let search request is equals await fetch search. Now, as you can see, we're trying to fetch data from our API route in our application. And now this is how you do it. It's a relative route. Uh, uh, If I were trying to fetch data from any other route, it would probably look something like HTTPS da 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 domain name da 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 domain name da da da. But no, actually, Svelte-kit is made it in such a way that we don't have to do that, and the route is actually relative. So all we have to do is just put forward slash in front of the search, and we can actually get data from it. And the method is post, and if you can remember, in our plus server.cs file, the function that we created, the request handler function that we created is post. It's supposed to handle post requests, and that's what we're gonna do. That's what it's going to do. That's why we make the method here post. So if I were to make this get or put, this post function wouldn't actually work. So the body of this, as if you've worked with any API, you know that if you're gonna use the post verb, you actually have to send some data out to the server. And how we do that is with this body property of our options object. And so what we're gonna send is the query, but we're gonna turn it into JSON. We're stringifying the JSON. We're stringifying the query into JSON. Now, if you remember, query is the value of the input box, and so that's what we're trying to send over to the server, so that the server actually fetches the data for that movie or that series and returns it. Next is headers. We just want we set content type application.json, meaning that we're going to be expecting JSON to return. Now we have a simple try catch block. We're going to say that there's a variable called search response, and we're going to make it wait for search request.json to actually complete. That is the value of search request. We're trying to turn it into actual JavaScript object. And if you remember, when we were returning our JSON, we specified in the object over here processed search result array. So that's one of the properties when our JSON gets returned. And so that's what we access here when we say search response dot process search result dot array, because that's one of the properties that's actually on the search response object, and we set it to our process search result array on the client. That's what we're going to use to map out data. If the try block is running, that means everything went well. The query results are ready, and so we set that to true, and we searching equals false because we're done searching. Actually, the first thing we actually did in this function, I forgot to point that out, was make searching true. So we're trying to say, okay, we're gonna go out and fetch this data, and while all this is running, searching is going to be true, and we're going to be using that to display some loading, state. Then we have a simple catch block that says, okay, if an error has occurred, set error has occurred equals true, and searching is equals false, because actually, even if an error has occurred, we're no longer searching. Well, let's go ahead and implement our or use our function. And how we're going to do that is the button that has that search icon in it, we're going to put an on click event listener on it and say every time someone clicks this, you run search. And then let's just spice this up a little bit. Let's say console.log processed search result array. I'm going to go ahead and run this. Now our application is running, and I'm going to go ahead and actually try to search for something. Mad Max. And boom, we get an array of 3 objects. So it works exactly as we thought it would. Now we're going to have to implement some loading state and actually mapping out those objects as in a card that the user can click on and get redirected to the movie that they're actually searching for. Again, we're back in our live demo. I just want to point something out. Whenever I actually do search for something, let's say, okay, I search for Mad Max. We have this loading state at first, and then we have these three things. These things are actually components. This whole encompassing section that has the name of the movie, an image over here, and it tells us whether this is a movie or a series. It's actually a component, and we haven't created that component yet. And we're gonna be doing that now. As I've said before, you can actually put your components anywhere, even in the routes folder, because if it's not a server file or a page file or a layout file, Svelte-kit is actually gonna skip it and not render it. It's not necessarily good practice, but in this application, we do not have many components, and there's no correlation between components to actually want to keep them in one folder. So we're actually going to be creating search list items in the root of the routes folder, search list items.svelte. Now we're going to create some markup for it. Basically, there's a div in here, an image, another div with a p tag, and another div with a small. Now, the image takes image base as the root URL and appends the backdrop path, and that's gonna fetch the specific poster for that image. And the name is obviously the name of the image, and this we're gonna check if our variant that gets passed to us is equals to TV. If it's TV, the content of the small tag is gonna be the string series. Else, it's gonna be movie. So now let's go ahead and in our header, let's actually import this search list item component. Next, we're gonna actually put in the markup that's necessary to display the search list items. Boom, and we paste that in underneath the div that houses the impute tag and the button tag. So first things first, what's going on here is if you remember our searching state, well, like if searching is actually equals true, what's going on here? Yeah, I'm sure Svelte-kit hasn't just re-updated its types. There's no actual problem with this. Cannot override across the split point. Yeah, I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Alright, let's keep going. If searching is actually equals to true, all we want to do is display a card, the header of a card that writes searching. If the query results are ready and searching is equals to false, and the query is not empty, that's query is not an empty string, we want to actually map out what we've gotten as our results, because results are ready, the search has been completed, searching is not false, and the query string is also not empty. So the user has actually typed something. There's still something in the input box. And we're going to be creating a card component, root, its header, its title. And for its title, we're going to be saying search results. And for the content, we're going to say if the process search result array is not equals to 0, you could remember, that was the array that actually contains the data that's returned from our server. If it's not empty, we want to map through it. And I haven't actually implemented this, so I'll actually just block it out, the on select. And so then we're going to be passing the backdrop path. We know that this is on the items object. We know backdrop path is there. And we're going to conditionally pass the name, items original name. If that exists, passing items the original name as the name prop, and if it doesn't exist, passing title instead. Because as you know, this API returns a bit differently for movies and series. Movies have names and series have titles. For the variant, we want to pass in the items.media type, and then in the component, we then check if the variant is equals to movie, and if the variant is equals to movie, we put movie as its type, and if it's not, we put series. Then we're going to pass in ID items.id. And then if an error is occurred and searching is equals false, meaning at this point, for some reason, our search failed, we're going to say search failed. Try another keyword or check your internet connection in the card title. And that's actually the UI for this. Now let's go ahead and run our application. See if everything works as required. Is up and running. We're going to test it. We're going to say House of Gucci. Mad Max. Now that our app is running, we're going to search for a movie. We're going to call it House of Gucci. Boom. Works as expected. We first of all get a loading state. And when the results is ready, we get our card that actually has our search list item that shows the movie House of Gucci. Now, what happens if I want to search for another movie? And Mad Max. Immediately I put in Mad Max, we get this. That's not what the user's asking for. And until they search again, that's when it's going to change. That's a bit buggy. A lot of users are not going to like that, I can bet you. And also for now, when we click on our search list item, we can actually navigate anywhere. So let's fix that. To solve that problem that we had previously, we're going to come into the search list item component and make some minor modifications. Now, the first thing we're going to do is actually, I want to import create event dispatcher from Svelte. Now, if you don't know what that is, create event dispatcher is a way to make custom events for your component. Now, this is it's a Svelte 4 feature, and so it's getting deprecated in Svelte 5. I don't really want to talk about it much, but because it's sort of a weird concept and it's getting depreciated and it kind of takes some time to understand, but I'm gonna go ahead and try my best to do it anyways. So we're gonna say that we want to create an event dispatcher with this dispatch thing. Create event dispatcher returns a function that we can name. It returns a function, and in that function, that function primarily takes a string, and that string, when you when you pass that string as the single parameter for dispatch, that's going to be the name of your custom event. I've chosen this as unselect because the user has like three options usually to pick from when the movie results get displayed on the screen, and we select one. So that's why I've actually named this custom event select unselect. So this thing is supposed to run whenever we actually select a movie. And now this is within a function called close search. Ideally, I'm going to put an on-click here, an on-click handler on the top div. And I'm going to say whenever this gets clicked, run close search. Now, what's going to happen is that our event is going to get dispatched on the top level that actually calls this component. And then secondly, we are going to we're going to navigate to a movie or a serie dynamic route. So now let's actually see the implementation of what happens in on the top level. What happens when on select happens on the top level? So the implementation on the top level is just like any other event handler that we actually have for a normal HTML element, say on click or on key down, something like that. We can now actually specify on select as a prop and pass it a function or just normal JavaScript. I'm going to be passing it an anonymous function, and the anonymous function is going to turn query into an empty string. I'm going to scroll all up the way here over to the script tag, and in there I'm going to have myself a reactive snippet. I'm going to say if query is equals to an empty string, then we want query results ready to be false, and we want process search results array to be empty. Now what happens is this: whenever we click this but search list items, when we click it, we run this close search function. This close first function dispatches on select and then redirects or takes us to another the movie or the series page. And in dispatching on select, it actually is going to run this function that we provided over here. It's going to turn query into a string. And this reactive snippet or this reactive block is going to run every time query changes. And when query is actually equals to an empty string, it's going to run. So turning turning this query into an empty string, it's going to make query results ready false and process search results array empty. So nothing is going to be rendered because to render results to the screen, query results ready has to be true, and we actually have to have an array to actually map over. Now that's enough talk. Let's actually put this into practice and see if this works. Oops, I guess I must have made some sort of mistake. Let's see what it is. Ah, here it is. Everything should be fine now. Hey, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and search Mad Max. We searched for Mad Max quite a lot. We get the results, we click on this. Alright, now in the previous video, we actually implemented the search feature, and whenever we clicked on the search list item, we're supposed to navigate to a movie page and close the the pop-up or modal that shows our results. Now there was a problem with the way that I typed the reactive block back in the previous video. I typed it this way. There was an extra set of curly braces that was wrapping the if statement or the if check. Please go ahead and remove that. That was one of the problems that didn't actually make that run. And so now if we open up our application and we actually come in here and search for any movie that we want, I'm going to search for Mad Max. We click on search. We're going to get the results for Mad Max. And I can go ahead and click on Mad Max. And now you can see that immediately the pop-up goes away and we get redirected to the movie, and we get directed to a movie page. Now, just in case if you needed for me to break this down again, we did this with the create event dispatcher method that we got from Svelte-kit. And whenever we click on a search list item, we run this close search function and we dispatch this custom event that we can provide a function for in the top level of the component. That's where we come here over in layout.svelte and do. On over here on select, we have turn query into an empty string. And then we have this reactive block that runs every time one query changes, and once query is equals to actual empty block, it's going to turn process search result array into an empty array, and query results ready equals false. And if query results ready is false, we're not going to be able to output any result content, and so all the results just go away all at once. Remember, on select gets dispatched when we click on that. And we can go back and you can just admire the project one more time. That's it. We've actually built this. Now, if you liked this project and you like the content that I've put out, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment on things that you would like to see improved or implemented, or projects that you might like to see in the future. You can also contact me with my contact details that I'll be leaving down in the comment section and the video description below. That's it. And I'll also be sure to be putting out Spell 5 content really soon. So be sure to check that out.